volume with the 5th Dalai Lama's oral transmission of Mañjuśrī, with commentary by His Holiness the Great 14th. So I'll guide through the page numbers in English as we go for those of you who have that volume. But I think Geshe will be beginning with the Vajrasattva because a few people had requested that. So in terms of how the Sundays are going to continue, of course, on the Sunday when falls His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, Geshe and myself will be at the Tibetan Cultural Center. So Don Handrick has kindly agreed to lead a session on that day. And then we will have a Chakra Samvara session for those of you following those teachings to be determined at some point in July before we open all of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra teachings for a month and a half at the beginning of August. So August will not have a new session of Anuttara Yoga Tantra. In September, Vajra with completion stage of Vajrayogini begins. And I think Dave's book group also will have a watch party for Kandrola on, I believe it's Tuesday, and that will be the last of his book groups until we start again for the fall season. So that's pretty much the plan. As you can see, we're not really stopping in the summer. It's just a lighter program, but we'll definitely be here most Sundays for those of you who are interested. So I see that we are at 1 minute to 10 o'clock. Please grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable. I'll invite Geshe down and we'll get started. So just a few couple of quick check things. With the humidity, it's 43 degrees Celsius here this weekend. So I've put some fans in the room. Is there any sort of annoying fan sound or are we okay? Okay, great.
Actually,
Okay, good.
I think the microphone flipped.
Sorry, Dave. I'm gonna have to turn up the volume to hear
Oh,
you.
no, that's okay. No, sorry. Yeah, it does sound like it's anyway. Maybe what we were hearing is the fans.
Say
Yeah,
again.
it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
I thought when the fans went on, it was that the microphone system had flipped, but when you got up, I could hear your voice much clearer as you leaned forward into the microphone. So I guess we're okay.
It's okay. Okay.
Yep,
All right.
yep,
All right.
yep. Sorry.
If it's a problem, let me know. For some reason, I'm not hearing you too well. It's probably because the volume on the big TV isn't high enough.
That's okay.
Is your is your mic muted or anything? You're very faint.
It's okay, I think.
Is
I was worried when I heard the fan that the microphone had changed, but I think we're
okay,
okay.
thank you. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
We might have to adjust the sound when we get to the Q&A
Yep.
so we can hear people, but we'll
Right.
cross that bridge when we come to
Oh,
it.
okay.
Now we'll get started.
Yep.
Eh? So Tashi Dele, greetings to everybody. Can everyone hear Geshe-la's voice okay? All right, great.
Did that freeze?
So then actually today the plan was that we should begin our new text. Sorry, there I can't see the messages that are coming up. Anyways, so Geshe-la said that normally, yeah, I feel. Okay. Again. Sorry. So Geshe-la said that nominally we were supposed to start the Lam Rim, the stages of the path teachings, but a lot of people sent some emails saying, could we finish up the Vajrasattva? So his plan today is to begin with a brief Vajrasattva and then go to the Lam Rim. So then actually in terms of Vajrasattva, most of the important main points were covered, but there were sort of a few remaining extra things. So the plan is that the first half of the class, Geshe-la will cover those remaining things, and then in the second half, we will go to the Lam Rim text. So then, in terms of the need for this, it's not different for most of us. We need to study the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, and the Lojong, the mind training teachings. As well, we need to purify negativities and obscurations through the practice of a Vajrasattva, right? So these are all needed things. And also, just to be clear, in terms of accumulating the Vajrasattva mantra, for the purpose of purifying negativities and obscurations, we don't need to receive a wang or a jenang, an empowerment or an initiation to do that. We are definitely able to engage in the practice without those. But if one wants to do the practice of Vajrasattva based on a self-generation, then actually an empowerment as well as a subsequent permission for Vajrasattva following that is essential. So then actually, so we need to differentiate between those two. If we're someone who can do the self-generation, how we practice based upon that. Also, if we are not someone who is doing the self-generation, how we practice based upon that. So there might be some discussion of that today as well.
아니 셔와 도마메 바네사 비타 디저 강가타 메와서 이티세 이타 디세 야보 이타 가윙은 나줄레 카체기.
So we should think that today we have this opportunity for all of the accumulated negativities and obscurations since beginningless rebirth in samsara. We have the opportunity to purify those. Seeing the goodness, the excellence of this opportunity, we should engage with a mind of joy. So perhaps Geshe said just a short motivation today. Let us begin with the recitation. Tumba chom den de jin je ba dra chom ba yan da ba zo be sang ge je ba dang shab su dem ba de wa she ba she Chonden de Dijin Sheba Drachon Ba Yang Daba Zobe Sangye Jeba Dang Shabzu Demba Jide Kebu Dewa Kalo Gyurwa Lana Meba Ladam Mi Namgi Temba Sangye Chonden de Pe Jawa Shakya Tuba La Chase Lo Chede Kyabsu Chi Ho Temba chonden de Dijin Sheba Drachon Ba Yang Daba Zobe Sangye Jeba Dang Shabsu Demba Jiden Jemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jurwa Lana Meba Ladam Mi Namgi Temba Sangye Chomden de Pe Jawa Shakya Tuba La Chase Lo Chede Kyabsu Chi Ho. The mandala. So shi peki jushi meto chan shi ra lin shi ni de genpa de sangye shin de mi de buwa gi jogo nanda shin la che ba sho idam guru ratna mendala kam niryata yami. Refuge and bodhicitta. Chedan sogi chenam la jangche badu dani kyausu chi dagi chenyen gibe senam gi jola penchir sangi joba sho. Chedan sogi chenam la jangche badu dani kyausu chi dagi chenyen gibe senam gi Jola penjir sangye joba sho. Chedan sogi chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabsu chi dagi chenyen gibe senam ge jola penjir sangye joba sho. So first we'll begin by bringing forth the motivation today. So as we begin, we want to, as much as possible, first imagine that the ordinary place where we dwell, the building, whatever surrounding us, the mountains, the environment, and so forth, these are all dissolved and purified through emptiness. And then we imagine that arising from this sphere, we visualize solitary father Vajrasattva for the purposes of accumulation and purification. So then we imagine that from this sphere of emptiness on a beautiful jeweled ground appears a wonderfully ornamented throne upon which sits solitary father Vajrasattva, white in color, one face, two hands, and so forth. So his right hand wields a Vajra, and in his left is a bell. He sits in the Vajra or full lotus posture and is adorned with heavenly garments and jeweled ornaments. Think that Vajrasattva is the embodiment of the nature of all of the spiritual teachers, all of the yidams or meditational deities, all of the enlightened beings. So think that as we gaze up, sitting on ground level together with us, on either side of us, our father and our mother, and behind all of us, all 6 types of sentient beings of samsara, but in a human embodied aspect, to gaze up towards Vajrasattva with a mind of faith. So imagine that we bring forth the Mahayana refuge with the causes of fear, faith, and great compassion from the bottom of our heart. Think, for the sake of all sentient beings, of liberating them from suffering and establishing them in every happiness. I will actualize the state of Vajrasattva's enlightenment to bring forth bodhicitta. In order to be able to actualize this state, I must purify all negativities and obscurations. In order to do this, I rely on Vajrasattva. This is the power of the basis. So imagine that, pleased with our effort, from the heart of Vajrasattva, beautiful light rays and nectars emanate, falling like a rain and entering our crown aperture, purifying all of our disturbances of body and mind. Think that as the light rays and nectars enter us and fill our body, all of the accumulated negativities and obscurations from countless rebirths until now are pushed out of our body in the form of unclean substances. So Geshe said that in terms of the motivation, that has been completed, and now as we turn to the practice of Vajrasattva, Geshe said that he's going to talk a little bit about the four opponent powers. He said that he didn't do this last class because he thought that he had presented this several times already and people were familiar, but as people wanted it again, he's happy to do again. So the power of the basis, Geshe said, there's different powers of the basis that are given, but the more common one is the power of refuge and generation of the Bodhi mind or bodhicitta. Similarly, though, if we think about the Vajrasattva in particular, we can think that our visualization of Vajrasattva and our reliance upon him, that actually this... Sorry, what are people asking about the volume? Okay.
Up a bit.
I just saw a bunch of messages flashing. And it's okay. They want higher?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it was the fan. When the fan came on, the volume dropped a bit.
I know, I understand. It's unbearable in here, though. Let me see if I can adjust. If not, we'll turn off the fan. We will. It's just very hot in here. Okay, I've turned one of the fans off and I've turned the volume up. Can you hear him now? Is that any better?
Or move the microphone a little closer.
I actually can't hear you, David.
Or you could move the microphone a bit closer.
A bit closer? Okay. Yeah. Is that any better? Okay.
You too, Ngodrup.
Ngodrup, you can even move yours closer too.
So sorry, just where we left off before that happened. Now, how are we? What?
We're good.
Is it okay? Because we'll continue then.
You're okay.
Okay. Okay.
Where are you
Sorry, I have ADD, so when there's a lot of messages flashing, I get distracted. I should turn off my messages next time. I'll do that. So anyway, where we left off, Geshe was saying, was that the visualization of Vajrasattva can also act actually as the power of the basis in the case of this particular practice.
그래서
Yeah. Jeez.
어다 드린 적이 왔어. 어다 때냐. 다또 있었나? 또 있었나? 다 인해서나 단디님에서 본체잖아. 다 때ஞ்ச도 알았던 거죠. 알아봐. 때ஞ்ச도.
So then actually, if we were just to list the four opponent powers in order, we could say that the first of the four opponent powers is the power of the basis.
예비도.
And then the second power is the power of the antidote.
안에 넘버 선지비도.
And the next power is the power of complete eradication. That's actually the accurate translation, the power of complete eradication.
예발이 라르도비도.
And the fourth is the power of turning back from the fault. It's sometimes translated as the power of the promise, but the actual accurate translation is the power of turning back from the fault.
어떤 듀는 줄 때는 된다 원하지다 본체다다 이미 알시고 오면 된다.
So Geshe thinks the order is something like that, although if you look at different source texts, you may see different orders that are given. So it is said that if one confesses and purifies, incorporating the practice of these four opponent powers, there is no negativity that cannot be cleared away. So a lot of holy beings, they give the power of the basis, as we just did, as the first of these four powers that needs to be cultivated. But there are some other holy beings that have a different opinion, and they say that the power of complete eradication is necessary to do first. And if we look, though, for example, at a lot of the texts of the Vajrasattva sadhanas in particular, we'll see that the power of complete eradication, this is actually something that comes towards the end. So we'll see, for example, verses that are like, under the influence or due to the power of ignorance, alas, I have engaged in negative actions, right? This is the power of complete eradication. So the power of complete eradication, although in the Tibetan it's not there at all, it is a mind of regret. So some people give it as the mind of regret. So a lot of holy beings advise to start here because they say that actually if the power of complete eradication is well and in place firmly, then all of the remaining three powers will unfold very easily and effectively. So the cheek ne cheek pet men jawa da wo cheek draws ma zambuling cha tsong gi kange den so de So if we look at all of the problems in the world, all of the problems and difficulties within the world, we can have this understanding that they arise due to negative karma. And also we should have an understanding and a conviction that if we just allow the negative karma that we have accumulated to remain in our mind without purifying it, we will continuously have to experience the difficulties, the suffering that are a result of that negativity.
다 대이자 디바 먹여와셔야 다 때는 리문도 sombe 초아질래서나 다 된 엄바선집에 또 선을 던지시기 바래.
So to have this feeling that it is definitely not okay that I engaged in this negative deed and that I leave it without purifying it, this can be considered the essence of this power of complete eradication.
당가로서 다 로지 몸보 고사라와 제말라리피 도이 쿰바테 가제 테마 몸보 야기슈소 다 대지 강가롱가조 다 고차이서 대지 손을 또 그야레스.
And so when we think about the importance of engaging in purification, we can think of many of the stories of the holy beings. For example, Lord Milarepa, who had to take down and put up a tower many times in order to purify his obscurations.
다 던지지레서 다 던지지사 다 아니 던지 디필레데 메바서야 다 소소를 다 깔레 메바 초와 요비토네 달래 같이 템보지 레용구야레스.
And so on the basis of cultivating this power of complete eradication first, then as we engage in the remaining powers and purification, we can definitely do that with feeling and conviction. This is the advantage of this approach.
다 코이 강에 가제 포게 정서 뭐시 가제 파스 계제시바 이나요 다 TV 누이다 데데와이는 간서 좋아되는 거야.
And if we think about the relationship between karma and all of the different kind of problems within samsara and within the world, when we contemplate this, we shouldn't do with a feeling of separation, like we're watching it on a TV or something, right? That is not ideal.
당가로서 몸보 고사라와 조미용 같은 라마촌 카피가 조미용 뚱바니 근데 생년에 특별히 다와 타투된 제자비깔 다 고금만 되으니 라시바르 라 레자바라와스.
So for example, we know that when Lama Tsongkhapa was receiving instructions from Mañjuśrī, the Buddha of wisdom, on emptiness, when the instructions were being given, at a certain point he realized that he actually had not understood them well.
단다 고금만 되는 니라야 돼. 퍼게셀냐 아니 뒤에 돌로 초사 주주지 다 용용로 주지 녀래시나 고는 디세지를 단데 고용 거레스.
So what Mañjuśrī advised him to do was to keep those points in mind, was to note those points in his mind, then engage in the purification of negativities and obscurations, and subsequent to that, then the study and practice of those points would be successful. And so we know the stories of what happened subsequent to that, right? That Lama Tsongkhapa engaged in the practice of prostrations, offering the mandala, and so forth. So there's a lot of kind of stories behind that, but we won't go into all of it. So if we really have compassion and concern for ourselves, though, this awareness, this conviction is very important, that if I do not purify my negativities, there is kind of no way to improve. We should have firm conviction of this. So it's also explained in the text that merely the power of complete eradication, right? So I'll say it's not really an accurate translation, but it's an essence translation, this power of regret, that is enough. That is enough to stop the increase of karma, the increase of negative karma. So just that one power alone, that's how powerful it is. So the traditional explanation goes that if one begins the day in the morning by engaging in a negativity, and by the nighttime before one goes to sleep, one does nothing to purify or confess it, then by the next day, that sort of one becomes multiplied into two negativities. Yeah. So if one, however, before one goes to sleep, reflects on the day and thinks that, what I did this morning or what I did this afternoon was definitely not okay, it's a negativity, and one feels a measure of regret for that, then the power of karma to increase or multiply is automatically stopped, right? That particular negativity will not increase.
오다 더가 롱게 손이 니 차야라 코로 차마던 거 피과디야.
So think about how powerful that is. That means the power of the increase that would have taken that single negative karma and multiplied its power to the equivalent of 2 misdeeds, that is stopped. That capacity to increase, that momentum is stopped.
오다 또 레레라요. 단 니파마다 서서서요. 와서 오다 때려요.
So then each of those, of the 4 opponent powers has a particular benefit. This is the benefit of the power of complete eradication.
오다 드타라 타마요 아레테네 이나요 단 요랭이네 고자비 갈테 양엘레레지레 디야가 야르텐데 야레스.
So in a lot of the sadhanas, as Geshe mentioned, right, this power of complete eradication of regret appears at the end of the liturgy, but in accordance with the advice that is just given, we can actually meditate on regret at the beginning of the practice.
다 디티네 다 당에 때문에 디파데 메와조이 땡제 또 대다시 도제셈바 이스드마 송지 연배용 서소소시다게 연하데 시야보다.
So following that power of complete eradication, one then brings forth the power of the basis. And so one can think of the, through the basis of relying upon Vajrasattva, or perhaps Tara or Buddha Shakyamuni, whichever deity you are appealing to, may I purify.
Deswa oda diitine tene poges ya posi tani ta te lama kangingo yedo kangingo oda teji kachimore diores.
And when we use a deity like Vajrasattva in our practice of meditation, as we visualize having the understanding that they are in essence the embodiment of all of the lamas or spiritual teachers, all of the yidams, the meditational deities, and so forth. This is very important.
Oda yung roro sosogeta yedo seri chachimbo tane on sosogeta poge on shisageta lama tani yarawas oda teji 다 저 많이 만나고 테니소지 말이 이제 저 대지 고선을 또 그래서
lam shusagi lama dinso lama gingo yimpa samlotana wang shusa dinso And so as we are kind of cultivating this awareness of that deity as the embodiment of all of the spiritual teachers, Geshe is just explaining that in particular one should recollect one's Vajra master. So those lamas from whom you have received tantric empowerments in particular, they have to be recollected. It's not like, the teacher who you see more often can be remembered and those kind of go to the side. It's really important to recollect those lamas specifically. So there's a story that Geshe is going to tell, maybe, if we have time, related to that particular point. And so also connected with the contemplation, the brief contemplation that we did earlier, then going for refuge and bringing forth the mind generation or bodhicitta, these are also considered very important powers of the basis. In fact, we could say that they are the kings of the power of the basis. So all of the negativities that we have accumulated from beginningless rebirths in samsara up until now, they are normally on the basis of 2 different categories. So the negativities are accumulated on the basis of the first category of the Buddhas, negativities accumulated in relation to the Buddhas, and the second category, negativities accumulated in relation to sentient beings. Other than these 2 categories, there's no basis for that negative accumulation. So it is said that if we fall onto the ground, we need to use our hand to push ourselves off the ground. So the idea is that whichever was the source of the accumulation of the negativity. It is that source that we need to connect with in order to be able to purify it.
오다 던디 이자 손질라 때네 수이 디파데 다시안로 공발라 때네 손질라 때네 수이 디파데 추른도네 칼레칼레 종화 쳐야 되레스.
So in terms of the negativities accumulated on the basis of the Buddhas, it is through the practice of going for refuge to the triple gem, including the Buddhas, that we are able to purify that negativity.
오다 쇼바고 니지고 다 쇼주지 세조르와스 오다 던디 공발라 때네 센젤라 때네 수이 다나 디파강가 다로 야레스.
Similarly, when we meditate on love, compassion, or bodhicitta, these minds have as their basis a recollection of all sentient beings. So it is through cultivating those minds that we are able to purify the negativities that we have accumulated in relation to other sentient beings.
오다 또 닌도스와스 다 데니라 당안조 가조 모모도스와스 저는 제바르지 저는 샬라자 어느 때는 제바르지 시에 So
that is the power of the basis. And then when we think about the next one, which is the power of the antidote, we can think of many different practices. So for example, in the last installment of the commentary, Geshe explained about setting out the offerings, how we visualize, bless the offerings, and then actually present the offerings. This is actually, when done in a certain way, this can be a power of the antidote.
오다 가정안조 뭐냐 계자 뭐도 송아스 오다 가정 드셰가 라데 단계 도지 삼바시 다한테 송 도추요하레 수시우 코로레 샤유 코로레 드셰가 라우 코로레.
And so this can be done, as was explained last time, on the basis of we present the offerings with Vajrasattva as the front generation, and Vajrasattva as the front generation, he is the embodiment of all of the deities of the field of accumulation, all of the deities of refuge.
다 드네 텔다 프게 다 소소 프게 산로고 세시고 디네트네 소지sembe dombal에 디네 다 프게 깨지 주시거든 라시에 아니 제바샬라 자티 제바 피와드레스.
So what we do is we visualize, for example, Vajrasattva, understanding him as the embodiment of the field of accumulation. We bring forth refuge and bodhicitta. We recite the verse for renewing the bodhisattva vows. We recollect emptiness, and then we arise instantaneously as the self-generation of Vajrasattva, and then we purify and make the offerings. So, of course, if one has not received an empowerment, a full 2-day empowerment or highest yoga tantra empowerment, one cannot generate as the deity, so one does it on the basis of front generation. It's not good to do a self-generation if one has not received empowerment. So there's many ways to practice Vajrasattva, so we need not worry if we haven't received that empowerment. We can practice visualizing the front generation, Vajrasattva in front of us. We can imagine Vajrasattva on the crown of our head as we engage in the practices. So there are still many ways to connect with, to engage in the practice. And so a very long introduction, but anyways, Geshe would now like to go to the point where we left off last time. Sorry. Sorry. Ale, ngapa kawat. Tinga pareve. Okay. Losa.
오야 다데 가서 아니 로서서 달라시네 보게 어다 들리지네 괜히
Deni.
됐고요.
Pemedintang.
다 로서서 라시비가라 아니 녜네 존 총총을 단두는 릴라워치 가서 로서와스 동뱅월에 원래 뼈마도 알레다 이치고 찌는 로도 찌니와스
Yeah.
총총을 이거 로서서 다 라시비가 라주고네 라시야 대우 같이 못 쓰고요.
So when we speak about the self-generation, we can think about the self-generation in sort of a very easy way to practice. So we can think that from the sphere of emptiness, there appears a letter Pam, which transforms into a lotus and moon disk, upon which we arise as the deity and so forth, and that covers the self-generation. But from time to time, it's very good to sort of slow down and do the self-generation based upon the 6 deity practice of Kriya Tantra.
다 알아테 질시지로와 다 단다가 안들 도제 semba 카츠 세다비칼 도제 semba 코로용 근도 가보 아니 대행이알 다 홍대네 근도 가보 다와 대용 근도 가보 아니 도제 semba 대용 근도 가보 소도 요레스.
So then, just to sort of go back a little bit, in terms of the visualization itself, we see that in the Vajrasattva practice, right, a lot of what we're visualizing is white in color. So the moon disk and lotus are white in color. The hum, which melts and transforms into Vajrasattva, is white, as well as Vajrasattva himself. And then when we are visualizing the 100-syllable mantra, this is often visualized as white in color as well.
다 기빠 저세 가리 다시 뭐 알단드거든 다 이나 근도 가보 찌빠 임발라 테스 만다와다고지 가시 세근도 나와
Ale.
가시 다인도 나와
Ale.
두근도 나와 가보 만다와 테스
Kabo mandawa kare dondawa kare dondawa kare.
가보를 초절 가보 세보도 년도 리반다고 더 요아와
Oh, right.
두근도 나와
Right.
다인도 나와
Dawe dondawa.
다 테스 만다와다고.
So Geshe is just explaining that when one visualizes as white in color, this can sometimes create a difficulty in terms of contrast. So what he advises in that case is that when we visualize the mantra or the hum, for example, we can visualize as sort of like an off-white color. For example, incorporating a little bit of yellow, like the color that the moon shines, for example. So in terms of the sources of this instruction, we see that particularly when we look at the Chakra Samvara Tantra's explanations of Vajrasattva, it advises incorporating these colors to sort of contrast the different white colors. So then in terms of the 6 deity practice, if we were to mention those, we have the emptiness deity, the deity of sound, the deity of letters, the deity of form, the deity of mudra, and the deity of signs. So whether the practice of deity yoga comes out well or not, this really depends most importantly on having the emptiness deity in place very well. So we can think about the selflessness of persons, the selflessness of phenomena, and then we can contemplate how this mind, contemplating selflessness, contemplating emptiness, arises in its appearance aspect in the form of Vajrasattva. This is one contemplation we can do. And so this contemplation of emptiness as related to the deity, right? This emptiness is common to both sutra and tantra, and this contemplation can be engaged in by anyone, regardless of whether one has received empowerment or not. And it's actually, this contemplation is the substantial cause of the self-generated deity. It is the substantial cause of the self-generated deity.
go jaya te pe nyo da sa bore de lila wo mo dise
So a lot of people say the self-generation part of deity yoga is really difficult. Okay, dissolving everything into emptiness, I get that part, right? We can conceptualize that. But then from emptiness arising as the deity, what is actually arising as the deity, right? This can be quite difficult.
me te dembo ro da ta ta chi mando na ta ta chi me na phe pon chi me na ta lila wo ma res.
So we can see, right, how that would arise. You don't know exactly what is arising as Vajrasattva from emptiness. How do you go from emptiness to Vajrasattva? If you don't know the steps that you're supposed to contemplate, this could be difficult.
Yo re chi o ta ji tsu do ma do te ji nyo le she ge pe de wo chen mo dus so so phimbo ke sa wo ti tin de ji tsu do ma go ka ne de wo ma de se ne se ya res.
So some people complain, right, like I can't practice tara with the self-generation because, like, how can I impute tara onto these contaminated aggregates that make up my body and myself? Like, how can I actually do that?
Te dembo ro was te dembo ro das je se yo res koi phimbo ro was koi phimbo te ji tsu do ma go ga na te ten de wo yo ma ya po chena.
And that makes sense, actually, because, right, this aggregates, especially the form aggregate, it is a samsaric body or aggregate, and therefore it's contaminated. So how could that possibly become tara?
o ta tandi ji za tumba ni de che se ka wa yin ngo chu ge den de le ngo de wa so je se ti ge res.
And so this, right, is why it is so important to begin the self-generation with that contemplation of emptiness, right? It resolves that issue.
o ta kanga lo tumba no lo pa nga zu cha lo lu ba no ji lu ndo yo res ko yin ne se kanga.
So what we want to do in the beginning is dissolve everything, not only our body, but all of the samsaric aspects surrounding us into that sphere of emptiness.
This one, ta tumba te do tumba so no to ke se te do dig no tumba no no ji wa was ye jin yo do to ne ta la yo
so the emptiness itself and the mind comprehending that emptiness, it is the appearance aspect of those two things that arise as the deity.
kuwa ni wa kanga pa zo kuwa sa ba zo no ji ta so no to to na tene de wo yo are ten de nyo de yo ma res.
You can think about it as like a building developer, right? If you want to build a new house on a property, you have to take down the old house and take away its remnants first before you can start building. It's a little bit like that.
o ta me mo to as ta ka son de no lo tumba so no to cha ne tumbe ngo le so so ge tan de hun yi ji yo was hun yi te le ge ze la ma shi wi nga hun yi te do ji che nga ba hun yi ji yo wa.
Yeah.
o te le de ge ze pa de me ba chin ne la de ni she sa te ja le wi ka chin bo res.
So then we talked a little bit last time about how that hum, before one arises as Vajrasattva, that hum can melt and transform into a 5-spoked Vajra with the hum letter marking the middle part. From this, light rays go out to all 10 directions and accomplish the 2 purposes. The meditation on the 2 purposes, this is extremely important.
o te ni she sa pe jan no la yo are te wa ko sa wa yo cho le tani mi pa ja chen bo ni si ta yo are sa tani wol ke je yo are
Sorry, dun dang mikpa yewa chetang hakumas.
se shi wa sa ni ta mi pa ja chen bo ni go ge ru de je mi pa do ye de je mi pa.
Oh, right.
o ni go res.
And so the 2 purposes are sometimes expressed as objects of focus or objects of contemplation. The first object of focus is one's own welfare, and the second object of focus is the welfare of sentient beings.
o ru de je mi pa ja chen bo rung ge to ki hon le ge ze shu chu le chen ne la shu ji ja wa se do chi pa la ta ge ze re ri ne ne le ta che wa pa so ba pa da me pa che wa pi.
Humare dorjirwa, humyope dorjirwa.
Yeah.
So then in terms of taking oneself as the object of reference, one imagines that the Vajra marked with the hum emanates out light to the 10 directions. At the end of each light rays are beautiful offerings that are made to all of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas.
ta che wa pe wa la te ne te do ge ji le de wa che wa chi she ne la ane ta ge ze chi le bi ka la
Yep.
ane te do ge ku su tu so ge chlo ka ga so so le ta ge ze do nyon do ro so so chi.
So when those offerings are made, they give rise to great bliss in the minds of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. those light rays are then reabsorbed into the Vajra, which, remember, represents our mind. They absorb into the Vajra, and at that point one imagines that because of great bliss arising, one receives the blessings of holy body, holy speech, and holy mind of the deity.
그래서 어다 대지 강가 루소소 시트네 다 투면에서 비디저 강가 다니 다 보게 자지 신질로서 소매 미바템 보체나로 대지 미바세.
And as one receives those blessings, one thinks in this way, all of my negativities of body, speech, and mind accumulated since beginningless rebirths in samsara until now have been completely purified. And then one thinks, I have achieved my own purpose, my own welfare. So this is the contemplation, taking one's own welfare as the object of reference.
다 예대지 미바 용어 특기 다 루소소 단가 혼지 요바스 또 제쟁아바 혼지 기만 혼요 알아바스 혼텔에 게제쇼 찔러티네 게제레린더네 센체가 코이네 종와서야 아니 센체로 루소소를 게제데 푸바 존지 보게 디저 강가 다니라 보게 다
So the next one is taking others, taking the welfare of others or the purpose of others as the object of reference. One again imagines that from the five-spoked Vajra, marked with a home, countless light rays emanate to the 10 directions. As these light rays emanate, they purify completely the various abodes of samsara. And then, as they touch the beings within those abode, they completely purify all of their negativities and obscurations. And in this way, one achieves the purposes of others. So through the power of that visualization, then one accomplishes the purpose of others, the second object of reference. So in terms of the visualization, Geshe said, this is like the most important of the important, because it's on the basis of these visualizations that we accumulate the power necessary to arise as the deity. Right. And so our conception of like, this isn't really happening, I am not doing this sort of doubtful conception, that is the main hindering factor of our deity yoga practice. Remember, Lord Milarepa, Gyawa and Sapa, Kedrup Norsang Gyatso, it was through practicing like this that all of those holy beings were able to achieve the result of enlightenment in one lifetime. So it is said, remember, that through the practice of Tantra, one does not need to have the accumulation and purification of 3 immeasurable eons to accomplish Buddhahood, that these accumulations can be completed, in one lifetime. Geshe was always amused when I trip on my words. That's not very nice. So all of those accumulations and purifications can be completed in one lifetime, and that is because of the technology of these visualizations with the lights, the nectars, and so forth. So as we reach higher and higher levels of practice, right, we incorporate more refined understandings. For example, that the nectars and the light rays, they're not just visualized nectar and light rays, they are in the essence bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And as we incorporate those understandings, the visualizations become more and more powerful. So we are going back to the sadhana. So as I mentioned, there is a sadhana for this. It's not super long, so my plan is to translate this by the end of the summer. I have to get my thesis in next week, so by the end of the summer, I will offer this as Kedrup's gift to you. So please be patient.
다 두가 다 된데 군다. 네 오토로 소소 다 하시네 두가 다이tin 혼이지 와스. 혼이 때레게제 쇼질 치네라.
Yep.
아니 다 이시바. 로돈다이. 제셈바 다 쇼지 있네. 손지가 다 신이네라. 아 도제셈바 다 사야 뭐지 된데 와서 또.
So where we are now is on the visualization of merging the wisdom beings with the commitment beings. So at this point in the sadhana, one is in the form of Vajrasattva. One imagines that from a hum at one's heart, countless light rays go out. They invite the wisdom beings, and those wisdom beings descend in the form of many, many Vajrasattvas that enter our body.
타마 강가 도제셈바 쥐를 터네라. 아까서라 쥐데 롱구루 소소가 다시 월을 치된데셔.
Yeah.
So
So how this works is we invite all of those wisdom beings, and they're kind of like waiting at the crown of our head. And then as we recite Zahum Bam Ho, the first step of that is they enter our body. So za means to invite to one's forehead. Hum means they then merge and descend within one's body. Yeah, so bam means that the wisdom and the commitment beings mix together. Ho means that they become, the wisdom and commitment beings become of one inseparable essence, like milk and water perfectly mixed together. So just for a point of clarity, remember when we speak of the commitment being in this context, this is oneself in the self-generation of Vajrasattva. And when we speak of the wisdom beings, these are the invited beings that dissolve into oneself. So another visualization we can do is imagining that oneself as Vajrasattva, from the whom light rays emanate and pervade the 10 directions, inviting all of the initiating or empowering deities. Ale, ganso kawa du dala wandu so tatun ngaparebe. Right. So we are Vajrasattva, we invite and summon all of the empowering deities, and then we make a request. All of you exalted Buddhas, please bestow empowerment upon me.
So
sorry, Wang Ma Shugin den so wa. Ya boko maso. Yeah. Ya boko kintu kyone. So dorji senpai yempa de.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Hako-san. Yeah, this is basic ne. Yeah. 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 Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Sorry. So, so an important distinction. So Geshe said that he wants to present this visualization in a way that everyone can do. Right? Geshe is always worried about folks feeling left out. So, if you do not have an empowerment, you can still do this visualization. Right? You just visualize Vajrasattva here, and when you say, please bestow empowerment upon me, they're not bestowing empowerment upon you, your ordinary body, because you haven't done the self-generation. But they'll be bestowing empowerment on this Vajrasattva that you visualized at the crown of your head. Yeah. So we can imagine that as these We can imagine. So Geshe was saying, I should tell people, because maybe I think sometimes people wonder why are Ngodrup and Geshe laughing. So the reason that we're laughing is because Geshe said that you can visualize some of the empowering deities holding nectar, some of the empowering deities wielding vases. And then I said, hey, wait a minute, isn't the nectar inside the vase? And Geshe was like, yeah, okay. So some of the empowering deities are holding the vase with the nectar. Some of them have different empowering substances, and they are bestowing the initiation. Yeah. So Geshe said, we can expand this visualization of the empowering goddesses with some of them, holding those vases and pouring the nectar, but some of them can also be holding like heavenly garments which they dry our bodies with and so forth. So one can expand the visualization that way. So then one recites the mantra Om Saura Tathagata Abhishekata Samaya Shriye Hum, then the initiating water kind of fills up our body, and some of the remnants of the water come out the crown aperture of our head. This transforms into the form of the excess nectar, transforms into the form of Buddha Akshobhya.
This one, ta pata ta gaze ta nganzo ta pata se no nomba te ta chi nomba de ce nomba chi re ma to de le sonje do sonje samba so ga o ko su tu so ga sha shlo in re di ores.
So it's really important to remember that when we speak of the lights and the nectar are just the appearance aspect, right? The essence of those things is the incredibly profound blessings of all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
This was ta pena soji cho de ta du no mundu tenes no ji jiwo de no yar cha ta tomba sonji ne senela a ko sara was on ngine zo no soji cho de zo bele de ma amengani ma leba ta ga ronge ta yo bo jaje do chumbar je salma sa ma chi ne si zo ne la ani ta on ko di yar.
So this form of giving empowerment, right, is known as abhishek. It's like this blessing with the water. If we think to the story of the Buddha, right, we know that in the Mahayana presentation of that story, then the Buddha was born from the side of his mother. As he was born from the side, it is said that Brahma and other Vedic deities appeared and lifted him up so that his feet did not have to touch the ground, after which they bestowed abhishek. They bestowed like a bath offering to him.
Ta koro sudu ta noji nganzo ta cha chemo zone ta teni se bochwa teni zibara was ye ngine la ta nganzo che tobori je thoi ta ikala ane ta lan la do la monda pe ne la on ko wa ta teni ne se yo
nganso sangi go pang drupdu ladi
me sundi cho den zombele te pe be kala ala yung bo jaje do chumba koro so ze bochi thwa was
ye
ma yin ba te ngine la yo
ale
che toboji ta ikala
ane
sunji do sunji se ma mambo ga on ngine ko wa teni thong yo
ale. So Geshe is just clarifying that point of the story where the Buddha is being offered this bath offering, this abhishek, by the Vedic deities such as Brahma, Ishwara, and so forth. That was to the appearance of some beings, but other beings did not witness that. They witnessed another aspect of it, which is that the baby Buddha Shakyamuni was being bestowed empowerment by various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Yes, well, Mashe be a jamba jo, Sata Dendel and Nets Momboyares, Mashe be a jamba chesser, Hasos of Javari Naga, Rees to see in a digger a j.
Then it nganso perna nganso rinjun kieto gire so titsoyena.
Mashe Banduno, Mashe Banduas. Mashe be a jamba jos.
Yes. So then the excess water transforms into Buddha Akshobhya, and so Buddha Akshobhya, of course, one of the 5 dhyana Buddhas.
Ta nganzo chiru kashi ta ya chi ya ko de wo chin nganzo pachi ke chi be kala pena lumanda manda pake subanda manda le sona kashi kenanda ta cha kani ungere kashi ke ta ya ta jana manda kani ungere ti cha tenda wo te se yo
ale de la di so rigdire. So some of Geshe's one of Geshe's friends explained it to him this way, that here we have Akshobhya appearing at the crown of Vajrasattva. This is kind of shows you sort of which class of the deities, which Buddha family the particular deity is connected to. Geshe-la's friend explained it's like when you have a meeting of the UN or something, sort of each person that is greeted at the meeting will be greeted with their flag as sort of the standard and lets you know which country that particular person belongs to. This crown ornament tells you which Buddha family the particular deity belongs to. So we know that this deity belongs to this Buddha lineage, this deity belongs to that Buddha lineage, and so forth. So now we make a request, which is a glorious Bhagavan Vajrasattva, please purify the negativities and obscurations of myself and all sentient beings. And one makes the same request whether one is doing the self-generation or the crown generation. And having then made this request, we imagine that at the heart of Vajrasattva, dingansu dachi mare dunche rwa, di sebola gore mato. Tuki hungle zudro, di kawane, tuki kawa. Dorje samba sosore dunke dire. So from the whom at the heart of Vajrasattva, light rays emanate, purifying the negativities and obscurations of sentient beings, making offerings to the Buddhas and their children. So this is accomplishing the two purposes. And then as these light rays reabsorb, as before we mentioned, you think that through completing those two purposes, then all of the power, potential, and so forth of Vajrasattva and his activities has been absorbed into you. So next is, Geshe just recited really quickly, so I won't do again. This is the verses for making the offerings. If you have done the self-generation practice, of course, you imagine the offering goddesses emanate from one's heart, gather up the offerings, and make them to oneself as the self-generation. If we're not doing the self-generation, we can just imagine that in our ordinary form, we gather up all of the offerings and present these to the Vajrasattva who abides in front of us. So next is kind of a praise and a request to Bhagavan Vajrasattva, myself and all other migrating sentient beings without exception, our negativities and all of our negativities, obscurations, and their imprints are purified through you. And so then we imagine that from the heart of one is Vajrasattva, there's a moon disk upon which is a home surrounded by the 100-syllable mantra. And then at this juncture in the sadhana, we are engaging in the actual mantra recitation. We can also imagine that mantra garland surrounding the hung at the front generation or crown generation of Vajrasattva for the other folks. Oh yeah. So a minimum count, it would be 21 mantras, but of course if we can do more than that, that is very excellent. And so then in terms of the recitation of the Vajrasattva mantra itself, it is said to have kind of many exceptional benefits. And as we recite the mantra, it's important not just to do this passively, but also to imagine that from the mantra garlands, various light rays and nectars are entering ourselves and purifying us. So as we imagine and recite the lights and nectars enter and purify us, at the end of the recitation, we rejoice with a mind of joy, thinking that we have been able to purify our negativities and obscurations. And then we incorporate the power of turning one's back on the fault, or making the promise. You know, if we can't promise to abandon the negativity completely, at least we promise to try to lessen our engagement with it. Tipele kandis? Yeah. So some holy beings advise, right, we want to be honest. So when it comes to the power of turning one's back on the fault, we might not feel like we can fully promise that I'm never going to do this again. But just to leave out the power of the promise completely, this is something that is not advised according to many holy beings. So what the holy beings advise is you can make the promise to incorporate the power of turning one's back on the fault for a fixed amount of time. You know, I won't do it this hour, I won't do it this morning, I won't do it today, I won't do it this week, and then maybe you can get to a point where you're promising, I won't do it this month. So that's the way to kind of build that in. So this was Geshe's brief overview of the 4 opponent powers to be utilized in purification practice. And of course, these 4 opponent powers, along with the recitation of the mantra, these can be practiced by anyone, regardless of whether you have the empowerment or not. So there's So there is a little bit more instruction left to give about the way to recite the mantra, the meaning of the mantra. So Geshe will incorporate bits and pieces of this into future Sunday classes. So Geshe would now like to turn to his explanation of the Lamrim text. So just to remind folks, we're doing the 5th Dalai Lama's oral transmission of Mañjuśrī together with His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama's commentary. You can find this in the 14th Dalai Lama Stages of the Path, Volume 2, available from Wisdom. Geshe says, don't talk too much. Okay. Just wait. Jachija trukrebe ale ngachu jachija din re samso
Yesoma
sorry young Gersundong nganso Oh, right. Okay. Yes, so we are in the section about how to behave when listening to the Dharma.
Jatsa nombani kaji la tene loveja la tipa meba moruto ji shite so leba she inga molodo do papa tumeni je dombe che wo ji de ndiba pa mamen je je suira teba chin bi chi je ce tiso gosen je gone tela meba na siji gipa tonche sewa she be pemba do den june yila tipati
Somdro ma sonjwa. Right. So With correct altruistic intention and preparations in the context of listening to and explaining the Dharma, so we're on page 91, for the sake of attaining the state of perfect complete Buddhahood for all sentient beings, equal to the limits of space, Protector Nagarjuna and Arya Asanga in dependence on the kindness of the two regents and through their own ability, without relying on other instructors, excellently opened the chariot way for all heaps of profound and vast excellent Dharma taught by the teacher, the one gone to bliss. Atisha Shri Dipamkara's excellent teachings are the single merging of these rivers of Dharma into the way of the Mahayana. Coming to an understanding of these teachings through hearing, contemplating, and meditation is the source of all happiness and good that comes from clearing away all the webs of existence and peace. So then when we speak about these various lineages, we think of the Buddha as the teacher, and we also think of the other Buddhas, Maitreya, as well as Mañjuśrī. These three are often thought of. And they were the ones that together propounded the vast and profound lineages. However, after a time, the vast and profound lineages began to degenerate. And it was for this purpose, then, that Nagarjuna and Arya Asanga arrived in order to reinvigorate those. So just to be clear, when we speak about the vast and profound lineage, the vast lineage or the lineage of extensive deeds, we think of this in relation to Maitreya, right? And we think of the lineage of the profound in reference to Mañjuśrī. And the other thing, too, is that when we speak about Arya Asanga and the protector Nagarjuna, we'll see this Tibetan term, Shingte Sulje. Shingte Sulje literally means openers of the chariot way. So here, Sophie, who's an excellent translator, she's rendering that as charioteers. This word, charioteers, should only be used for these two holy beings, Nagarjuna and Asanga. So when we speak about this in terms of tenets, we say that that Nagarjuna was the charioteer of the middle way Madhyamika, and that Asanga was the charioteer of the mind only or Chitta mantra. Again. Yeah. So ultimately, we can understand that Asanga, within his mind, he was very much a kind of understanding and holding the Madhyamika or the middle way view. But he acted as the charioteer for the mind only or Chitta Mantran school of tenets. So why did he do this despite holding the middle view? Because he understood that the Chitta Mantran mind only school would be of great benefit to sentient beings. It would be able to bring beings closer to the final view, and therefore it was important that it continued to be propounded. And in terms of the holy being who took these lineages of the vast and profound and combine them into one stream of instruction, this is Atisha Dipamkara. So this stream of transmission is one that is able to bring benefit to all sentient beings, and all of samsara. Gonda di korwa karesogi yore?
거와 용조 또 매바선이나
매바선에?
나 끼워도 강가
Oh,
용사가
right. So this stream of the two combined lineages is the source for the emptying of samsara and the establishment in happiness of all sentient beings.
어다 리송아스 어다 대용 쿠데레 대용 티비 초레 티비 치노 시바니 티비 딜도 바시 티비 대마임바 티비 냥엔 디바 토
And so now we have a source, a kung is a source or a quotation to back up this statement, and this comes from the tsom, or the collection of indicative verses. Through hearing, one comes to understand all dharma. Through hearing, one overcomes misdeeds. Through hearing, one abandons the improper. Through hearing, one attains nirvana.
어다 rum바 tom보텔 다 티파 티파서 로주 제기나 어데서 마시바 강가시 다 매바촌이 다 데서 쉬운 거 와스
So through hearing, or Geshe also said you could say through studying, comes knowledge. So one's lack of knowledge is cleared away and one develops knowledge or understanding.
다 신을 소소가 다 내가 제도 신이 와이자 다 너네 디필레 가리나 다파 요아니라 게일레 강가시 드바딘 거래.
Similarly, once one comes to understand the Dharma through hearing, one also has all the information that one needs to stop engaging in negative deeds. So that's what it's meant by through hearing, one overcomes misdeeds. One understands which activities one should engage in and which activities one needs to diminish and abandon. And it is through that one abandons improper behavior and one can attain nirvana, which is liberation. So through hearing one abandons the improper, through hearing one attains nirvana. So the Tibetan word for nirvana is So the first part of that Tibetan word nyange, that means that Geshe said you can understand it either as afflictions or as negative karma. And le depa means to go beyond. So the state of nirvana is going beyond affliction and karma. We could gloss it like that. So it means to go beyond a suffering and the causes of suffering and their imprints. That is the meaning of nyangin le depa. And when we speak of nirvana, we can speak of nirvana in a Shravakayana or Hinayana context and nirvana in a Mahayana context. The Mahayana nirvana is often referred to as the final nirvana or the non-abiding nirvana. Yeah. So why do we say non-abiding in the Mahayana context? Because the Mahayana nirvana or enlightenment abides in neither the extreme of peace, so that's liberation for oneself, or the extreme of existence. So one is beyond both samsara and personal peace, non-abiding. Right. So we say that, for example, a foe destroyer, he or she has achieved nirvana, but they have not achieved the non-abiding nirvana. Why is this the case? Because although they have abandoned samsara, they have not yet abandoned the extreme of peace, the peace of personal liberation. Therefore, we do not refer to the nirvana of the foe destroyers as non-abiding. And so Geshe said that some even argued that there's a little bit of a trace of the extreme of existence still for these foe destroyers because there is some sort of attachment to the bliss of nirvana for oneself.
아까서 시이 대화사 까오 몽볼 스치가 레카체 토고면 도와스 코텔 녀바자리 기고서 데데.
So those foe destroyers in their nirvana, right, they are in a state of bliss arising from meditative absorption that cannot be disturbed for many, many eons. So it is a very powerful attainment.
어딘데 바지 지바 따르사 통마 티피텔라 베바셰발라 티파 메나 디 대손바 문주 델라 때네 고지고 먹고이 통마 티파 샤저 신드네 같이.
Therefore, first settle your understanding of them through hearing. Without hearing the teachings, one cannot contemplate their meaning, and then there can be no meditation based on that contemplation. Therefore, it is extremely important to first listen.
티판 고추도 소나 당가서 아니 내 지시했어요 알아봤어. 아니 내 갑유바사 아트과로 야레스.
So just through merely listening to the Dharma, when we listen to attention, if we think of the three faults of the pot, this overcomes the first, right? The fault of the upside down pot.
다 티파 여보 내발레서는 티파라 때네 다 솜발레서는 내 샤다와사 아트과로 야레스.
And then Shaduasanat Ikungyopadiro. Yeah. And when we are contemplating the teachings that we are listening to, when we are contemplating them, then through contemplation we abandon the fault of the leaky pot or the pot with the holes in it.
다 티파도 솜바 니데 포게 다 초알레서나 다 곰메바 곰바들레 거로와스.
So then through hearing and contemplation, this naturally takes us to the final stage of the meditation on the meaning of the teachings. Through meditation, ultimately, this is what we use to purify the mind. So this overcomes the third fault of the pot, which is the contaminated pot.
체토보 시초 노라 통체와시 요나 저도 뭐체 지바시의 저위스 도송아 대답이시 라자 체토 공화 통마 시케시게 주는 라지 디고제 대논데시 야바.
So take as an example of something in this life, like a well-paying occupation that is considered good and respectable work. If one has such a job, it is generally considered to make life happier. In order to acquire the level of knowledge and skills necessary for such a position, one must first train with an expert and understand explanations contained in textbooks on the topic. As one accumulates practical experience, one gains familiarity and certainty. Thus, one must become a skilled person in this way, and it is unfeasible that there could be an expert who has no training or experience.
다 라라 너 때네스 나 데는 요바나 시바시니 럿 보시바서와 아니 라레전 요와 소저디 차지 니제 레데 라자 마나시던 저기바 마도 고요 말라시 요뇨메베 케바시 홈시바 따르 데페르와 지텐 듣존지 대시 대비시 아니 토체 지초 대다 총완베기나 드시니동 루제 거라 텐데 게이 고가시 저발라 대위 좀 존네 대이 존네에서 저 버섯 줘봐 내가 로기비 시차시 버섯 줘봐 얘나고 도송아
동송
세제노라 차도도 레세도 레도라 줘봐 류지 인데르타 담마 더베 더메지니 차이니까 대시 자와네 매반지위 된들 뭐체 시보고 뭐세네 셀라로 알리바데 시바샤기
Likewise, if one must put effort into accumulating such a collection of causes in order to gain knowledge that gives happiness in just this life, what need to mention the collection of causes that must be accumulated to bring about a perpetually virtuous state in this life and the next for oneself and others? Even if one has perfect external conditions, if one's mind is constrained by continuous jealousy, rivalry, hopes, and fears, then both temporary and long-term happiness completely disappear. Therefore, one must understand that a happy life depends upon one's mind. Since we can bring about that happiness through Dharma instructions and practices, one must understand those first. If not, one will not know how to practice. Through correct understanding and continual, gradual, and thorough analysis, one finds trusting conviction. Through this decisiveness, one's mind is moved. Through repeated familiarization with something, one's whole mind becomes the nature of that.
다 첸데 지보게 대시 던데 지보게 다 벌써 봐주라 발라요. 다 내가 뭐지 신이라. 대녀녀 그거 두아스.
So the example is that even for the sake of like happiness in this life, if we do this through a career, there's a lot of education and points of knowledge that we need to come to in order to achieve that. That's the example.
다 알아서 대리 주 보게 더 리가. 하고 살아온 더 첸데도 심하니 그게 대 벌써 봐주죠.
But our aim is further than that. Our aim is further and vaster than that. What to speak of the happiness of this life? It looks for the ultimate happiness of a future lives and beyond.
다 대를 보게 세건 로도 다 벌써 주박 다 뭐지 야보지 다 보게
So in order to be able to reach this aim, then we need to understand the way that the mind works and how to train it.
어단에서 맛이 바이나 다 메도 뭐 저거 다 레베 또 첨부 쳐바이나 아는 아자도 저도도 다 녀모 보게 세다 공화치 보게 대대바이나 가디나 다 첸다요메 시마요메 다 강감메 바지.
However, if in our endeavor as we come to more knowledge, then faulty minds such as jealousy, pride, and so forth are arising, not only will our practices be unable to bring us to that ultimate aim, they will be unable even to bring the happiness of this life alone.
어단에서 던지지 다 대시 요도 많이 세다 저 차지레문도와 저 세를 다 세고 노도 될
So mainly, of course, we understand that happiness, especially lasting happiness, is not arising mainly on external conditions, but rather the internal condition of the mind. Therefore, understanding how to work with and train the mind is very important.
대화도 누가 당하로서 노바이나 다 셰바보 강가로 있다니 셰바보 지와르 세르세는 세들에
So in terms of happiness and suffering, we understand that there is a doer that accomplishes happiness and suffering. In terms of the doer or the agent, if we were to ask really what that is on the actual level, it is none other than the mind. Therefore, the way of the mind working and its trainings as much as possible in the future classes, we will discuss those. So because Geshe is just expressing that there may be some new people who came specifically because we're finishing up the commentary on the Vajrasattva, he wants to clarify that although this is an important practice, the purification of negativities is not the ultimate aim or focus of Buddhist practice. This is a misunderstanding. So then we say then if the purification and so forth is not the ultimate or final endpoint of Buddhist practice, what is more important than purification? Certainly this can be answered. It is producing the minds of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, the method side of the path. And it is bringing forth the wisdom that comprehends the ultimate view, the wisdom side of the path. These are the ultimate practices, not purification. So as much as we are able to bring forth method and wisdom into the mind, the stronger the practices of method and wisdom are, correspondingly, the negativities will be diminished and eventually cleared away completely. This is important to understand. So guys, some Geshe's friends joke with him, it's like when we realize method and wisdom, the union of method and wisdom, it's like a get out of jail free card for the previous negativities one has accumulated. But in any case, they're very powerful means of purification. But think about it. If you didn't practice method and wisdom, but you were only doing purification of negativities as your cultivation, since negativities are endless, your practice of purification would also be endless. It's not going to just, that's not itself going to get you where you need to go.
다 레게 봤을 때 사뱅이 봐도 지바래도 와 사뱅이 봐지 얘는 콜 쳇도 레 마테나 그 가디에나 두는 게 신디부터 코시야 더 말와.
So what we have to do then is rather than focusing on clearing away every single individual seed, which is next to impossible, we can cultivate higher practices which are going to deprive the seed of moisture and fertilizer. If we deprive the seed of moisture and fertilizer, it will not be able to sprout.
다 손주지 세도 돈이 또 비시라 되가 다 쳇도 레인다 어디에 용 마치 가디나 키고 왔으나 그 레요나 메나 그 레가 잼도 와.
If we bring forth bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, this acts as a barrier, preventing any water or fertilizer from reaching those negative seeds. If there is no water or fertilizer reaching those negative seeds, they cannot bring forth a suffering result. So we don't need to have so much anxiety about it.
다 시사회 공부 잡아놓지 갈래 그 공부 전에 더 존로야마도 그 레가 메로.
So even if we don't clear away each individual seed completely, if we cut off the water and fertilizer and completely dry the seeds out, they're going to be rendered pretty much incapacitated.
어다 던데서는 또 내지 메지다 가로슬로죠 어디서 고스 대전에 다 고자리아 같이 머리도
So therefore, in terms of method and wisdom, then the hearing, contemplation, and the meditation on these aspects of the path is extremely important.
어다 뒤에 들이다 다니까 디디지래.
So that concludes Geshe-la's remarks for today.
가빙원에 겨와요 공쇼스.
So with a mind lifted up in joy, let us dedicate the merits. Changju semju rinpoche mache panam chejo chi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondo pewa sho tongni tawa rinpoche mache panam chejo chi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondo pewa sho jambe bao jeda kempa dang kundu zambo deyan dejin de da kungi jesu da lo chir gewa di da tamshe rabdu ngo dusu shebe gewa tamje ge ngowa gangla chodu ngapa de dagi gewe tsawa diku kyan zambo jeji rabdu ngowa gi Kanji rawe kowe shingande pendan dewa malu jongwe ne chenre ziwan tenzin gyazo ye shape site badu tengyo chi.
Diriti se tela tsusa drajong yo ta tiamo jachimo.
So think that through being able to engage with vast accumulation and purification today, may all of the study and practices come out well. Feel I've been fortunate to be able to do this. So through the merits accumulated by myself and others, as well as the blessing of holy Vajrasattva, we think of all of the conflict and dangerous situations arising within the world. All of this conflict and danger arises due to the evil minds of sentient beings. Therefore, pray that through the blessings and merit, all 6 types of sentient beings within samsara can clear away their evil thoughts and give rise only to thoughts of loving kindness. through all of the imprints, the virtuous imprints within the minds of all sentient beings ripening, may the sun of happiness shine on beings without discrimination. So we'll pause there. And of course, if you need to get on with your day, please do. But we can now take questions. So go ahead.
So this is Dave, the director of Mañjuśrī. Before we get to the questions, I wanted to
So
dedicate.
I think I'm going to need to turn up. Can somebody else talk, Dave? Because I'm not sure if it's Dave's mic or my TV.
Can folks hear me?
People.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to do something traditional.
No, Dekuli, that's really,
when the Buddha taught, he taught because he was requested.
Yeah, so Dave, I cannot hear words you're saying.
So Kedrup, you can just let me talk.
Sorry?
So the Buddha, when he taught when he was requested, and it was a benefactor that made this request. So at the end of the meal, the Buddha would dedicate the merit from the teaching. There'd be a meal and a teaching. He'd dedicate the teaching to the benefactors. So I would like to have us also do this traditional thing of dedicating this teaching to our benefactors. We are trying to follow the Buddha's tradition of having benefactors, making these teachings freely available to everyone. It's a bit of Dharma education, actually, to see how this works traditionally. We don't charge a fee because Mañjuśrī is also trying to practice generosity by making these things free and to offer these without expecting anything in return. So we try to avoid making requests. But we have received a lot of benefit recently. In the long run, we will need more help. So this is an attempt to try and encourage this generosity in a traditional fashion so that the Buddha's teachings remain long in this world. Thank you so much. So question and answer now.
So Geshe says we're lost and we don't know what's happening. And this is true because we can't hear a word. So I think I better go up and resolve this so that we can do the Q&A. Sorry.
Thank you.
Just give me a moment.
Can you hear better now?
No.
Interesting.
I'm not sure what the problem is because I didn't adjust anything, but I'm going to try on the side of the television.
You can just message them. They can start them. He sees them.
I think you can hear very faintly, I guess, because we're having a conversation.
Yeah, I can hear you because I'm literally standing on top of the laptop right now.
Right. Okay.
We can't hear you from back there, especially with the fans. And I'm sorry if we interrupted something important because we were.
That's okay. That's okay. This was not a coordinated thing. I decided we should try and thank everybody and dedicate the merit to our benefactors.
Yes, no, people really showed up for us. We're very grateful for that. That was a good idea. Yeah, so sorry, Dave, for interrupting that lovely dedication. I apologize.
Yeah, we'll sort out we'll sort out how to do this a little more smoothly.
All right. Okay.
But anyway, I think well, I guess we have to sort out the sound so that people can make their questions. Or
yes.
Yeah.
I can hear you now.
Okay, great.
Yep,
okay,
yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Did you see the screen share?
We did
No.
see the screen share, but I wasn't sure if we were supposed to be quiet and meditate, or if you were saying something, or if we were supposed to say something, or just proceed as usual with the questions. That was our confusion.
This is a bit off the cuff. My apologies for being a bit off the cuff. Okay, so let's proceed with questions.
Yeah. So I see a yellow hand, but I can't see who it is. So go ahead, whoever.
Losen Tendron, please go ahead.
Venerable Tendron, okay.
Hi. Geshe mentioned having a story that he would tell if there were time. And actually last week, Geshe also mentioned he started a story and he said, I'll tell this. He said something about telling that story later if he had time. So it's not a question, but request to hear the stories.
The story, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Thank
will
you.
put you that is like the most polite request I've ever heard, Venerable Tendran. I need to take cues from you. That was very skillful. I like that. Yes, I will translate that nice request. Dene nguma gen drung chik yures dabu chik sheswas. Dene ko yapo chene kunong yapo lang ne ko drung di tets mar nang ro nang dabu chik shugires. Hamako so drung chik lagires kasang lama son dering lama son sa. He can't remember what it was now. He can't remember what it was, unfortunately. Do you remember at what juncture this was, Venerable Tendran? Huh?
Right at the very beginning.
Yeah, it was near the beginning. Last week as well. It was near the beginning. And he didn't really start the story. He said, "Oh, there's a story that goes with this, but if there's time, I'll tell it later."
Yeah, didang
Oh, no.
yang drung chik jogires tutsu chungnang ansu mar shegi instabu chik lausma.
During the Vajrasattva commentary.
So he says he's really sorry, but it's not coming into his mind now. So
I think the story from today was about doing the visualization of your gurus.
oh yes, that point I remember. Maybe we can get that one. Nganso tso wang shupe lama se tab gores di kare chene resa. Numa di kola drung chik dusa. Ale, so drung yeres laus.
Me pena deren diwas ane pega lama sare maba isayo ngachina maba jagal lerwa
Loso.
jagal pene ta lama sare chinjin nela lama te no do de nela toja goje chena chila che chise junin dawo to moda wo chela
Loso. Ser.
che naguno
Nakung o.
nani ku de warwa
Sena o los.
toja goje lama tiga jagal lama tiga los peg puchu
Los.
ane chorol ono wis
Yes. Ale, los.
ono wis
Los.
다 저럴 안에 유도 걸었더니 오노 그거요 라마롱에 오노 주요스 뭐가지
Yeah. So Geshe said that Lama Marpa Jakar Yope Kapla, right?
yeah.
So this story relates actually to Lord Marpa at the time when he was in the land of India to receive some teachings and transmissions. And so then at the time he was in the land of India, he was staying with one of his gurus. And very late into the night, like around midnight or 1 a.m., his guru awakened him and he said, I've decided that I'm going to bestow upon you an empowerment. So do you want me to bestow this empowerment, or should we invite the Yidam deity to bestow this empowerment?
리스와 어다 대세비가라 나치네 뭐바이 텐디 단노 파진들와 오노 가지만 좋아도 있을 것 같아와 아니 뭐바게서는 다 라마 가디나 자데레 다 텔이 여도 다 겜보이자 여도 야가면 돈다 버치서는 돈을 여도 대선에 문으로 지나고 지라자레스
디밀라레 바다마 바랭아잖아 정디 So then at that time, and Geshe said he thinks that this is Marpa, but if it's another master, he apologizes. He gave this caveat for the story. Anyways, so at that time, of course, Marpa thought, well, to receive the empowerment from the Yidam itself, this would be something really special. So that's the request I should make.
다 tendeso taki yedo tsa chega tsa ya isa ta lama tiga ota tesen ri ma sons ani ko ro yedo ro ten le kola ta ne sa cha so tebe lo ji ya re sa to
Ale Yidam Marchina kare
yedo no ba ten la
lama di e
o ka ga ko ro pa ti te lo ji ya re.
And so as the story goes, then the Lama said that actually the Lama should be seen as supreme. Lama tso da botsigore. Yeah, and he said, therefore, the choice that you made to receive the empowerment from the Yidam, this is something that is slightly mistaken.
And
the story, and Geshe said he has to look up the story in the book where he read it, but the story goes that also because of that faulty choice that he made, Marpa, or whoever this Lama was, he had an obstacle to achieving realization. So there are many similar stories related to this principle of the importance of that empowering Lama. So normally, of course, this goes for all of us, right? We would think that being able to receive something directly from the yidam, from the meditational deity, that this would be supreme, because even being able to perceive the deity is rare. But actually, more important than the yidam or meditational deity for realization, it is said to be our guru, who shows us the three kindnesses. And so there is an analogy that is given to illustrate the point of this story is, who shows you the greatest kindness? The person who gives you a morsel of food to sustain yourself during a terrible famine, or the person who gives you some food as a gift during a time of plenty? Yes, so that is the story anyway that Geshe was thinking of. And so he's not sure. He said he feels uncomfortable if it's Marpa or not, but anyways, he will check on this. But anyways, the principle of the story is there. Yeah. Yeah.
I heard it was Marpa.
It is Marpa. Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Yes, yeah, Dave Marpa raised Chengitua. And so Geshe said, if you read on in the biography of Marpa, actually, it illustrates various obstacles that he encountered in his practice as a result of that mistaken choice.
So
Geshe says you got more or less a little bit of a story. It was it was stream of consciousness, but we got there. So maybe we take the next question if there is one.
We did have a question in the Zoom chat earlier, which was, and maybe it's answered already, but the question was, at what point does one recite the mantra?
Ngak sayadi kadures druptap nanglola. Yeah, so Geshe said it's actually once you do the self-generation and then make the offerings and so forth. So at the conclusion of the offerings, then you can recite the mantra, but it depends on the sadhana. Yeah, Geshe said in this sadhana it's very powerful because it includes the visualization of the commitment beings inviting the wisdom beings descending and merging, as well as the empowering deities bestowing empowerment. On this basis, some offerings are made, and then finally one can engage in the mantra recitation. And then remember, there is kind of a praise, which is also a form of request to something along the lines of, Lord Vajrasattva, please bestow your blessings to purify the negativities, obscurations, and their imprints of myself and all migrating sentient beings. Yeah. And so then Geshe said, rather on the basis of the crown generation or oneself as Vajrasattva, there is a hum in the center surrounded by the 100-syllable mantra of the deity. And so then Geshe said that one then engages in the recitation of the mantra, and one can do this based on the different activities of pacifying, increasing, controlling, or powerful and wrathful actions based upon the four fingers. So the thumb, Geshe is saying, is peaceful. Increasing is this the index finger? I think that's, yes, the index finger. Yes. Power is the middle finger.
this one. Then it Tamati, and it drop your letter.
And so Geshe said that di marebe.
Tamatama,
Dire.
the Jun to shoot to it.
Then also dire do a di drogi mare chick ni sumji dire. So di tambo. Ale, okay, I see. And the pinky is the wrathful ones. So I'm sorry, I got confused. So Geshe was moving his thumb. So I thought that the thumb was for the peaceful, but actually the thumb is moving it on top of the index finger, the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky. So the index is peaceful, middle is increase, the ring finger controlling or powerful, and the pinky is the wrathful. And so that's the finger that is under your thumb, which is moving the beads. Sorry about that. Yeah, so these are related to the different ways of reciting the mantra. And remember, if you are able to recite the Vajrasattva mantra 21 times, the increase of the negativity accumulated that day is stopped, so that negative karma will not increase. And it is said that if one is able to recite 100,000 of the Vajrasattva mantra with attention, all of the negativities accumulated can be purified. Yeah. And we can see that all of these recitation of mantras, also recitation of various sutras for purification, these can all be considered as a power of the basis. Tengitop nyempo topre. Ngaksaya dangden. So tengi top da wala. Let's kagire. Niga kunso topa sagires. So I say to Geshe that you said the power of the basis and the antidote. He said these can be considered as both, but the most powerful antidote, of course, is the meditation on emptiness, more powerful than the mantra or a sutra. And this is, of course, because of the fact that the afflictions all arise due to the root affliction, which is ignorance. The powerful antidote to ignorance, or the basis on which one overcomes ignorance, is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And this is the reason that the wisdom realizing emptiness is the most powerful purification. So anyways, that's an answer to that last question. He said sorry that he couldn't remember all the other stories, but he's going to try to remember them for next time.
Probably a story about karma.
You want me to say that, like a story about karma?
I'm guessing from last week it was a story about karma.
He said he really can't remember. He gives his apologies. If he remembers, he'll tell you. It'll have to be next time.
So we have a question from Charlene.
Yeah, go for it.
Tashirle.
Hi there.
Hey, I have a quick question with regards to a sadhana. When one becomes very familiar with it, it almost the visualizations come very quickly if one is very familiar with it. So does one need to read the sadhana, or can we just start visualizing and reciting the prayer? One reads through. I read through it, but because I'm familiar with it, the visualizations come very quickly. So does one always have to read the sadhana, as opposed to one just sits and prepares and starts visualizing and going straight into the sadhana that way?
Right. Okay. Yep, I think I understand. Nganso druptop chikyo na dene druptop namula tsik mambo chikyo redwa Yine druptap tutsu ringpo so na denet gom shane rwa se tabi dinso chatsangwa kyokpo rangjin chene yongire dua dene kele nyarya la tsik dinso datun kyogres se tabi chikpo drona digire besa.
Mimita so ya se da ki bon don je don to was. Aina tise yodi utsi man dona o ko de was ayat karina dise mo.
So Geshe said that he thinks that, like, for keeping the commitment, if you really know the whole practice, then yes, you can visualize and contemplate as a way of doing the whole practice. But he says when you have time, you should still recite the words of the sadhana, because the recitation is also a form of accumulation, and it engages with a more powerful merit than if you left it out. Certainly the visualization is the main thing, though. Definitely he agrees with that. And, you know, also different practices have different... What's the plural for emphasis? Is it emphasis? Anyways, whatever.
Emphasize.
Emphases.
Yeah.
It is
Emphasis or
emphasis,
emphasize,
right?
yeah.
Emphases.
Depending on the
With the
pronunciation. Yeah.
Like theses.
So
Yes.
I always remember you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. That's how I remember emphasis. But anyways, so different practices have different emphases. So in the case of Vajrasattva, Geshe feels the most important component is these 4 opponent powers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries, no worries. So now he remembers a story. So now Geshe remembers a story. So maybe one more story. Loso. Loso.
저로서 소전도 비깔 뭐 관계 다르지 등이 디파트 제 메세 키레게 두아스 그래서 관계 저마치 모시게 두아스
Ale.
저체 뭐
Karichene.
다그 다르지 또 저거 메세래 오 디파 저거 와스
Ale. Loso, loso.
나 이나 텔라 메스 porque 지지와 어걸랑 하고서
Yes, yes. So there is, this is a story of a lama from Drepung Monastery. And this lama was known for being very direct, very impertinent in his words. He would say, you know, seemingly like unpleasant things, truthful but unpleasant things to people. So one of the things that he said to the assembled monks one day is that when all of you go to Sojong, to the fortnightly confession ceremony, you all say like, "Uhula, woe is me," and you promise that you'll never engage in the negativities again, but you're all liars because you do that twice a month and you still engage in the same negativities. So I'm not saying that. I'm not going to recite that part of the ceremony.
다 경복을 말라비까 라그러 왔어 경복
Yeah.
네 경복을 라비까 네 저시에 메스 네 가르라바 이스리와 렐타기 이슬라바
Yes. So he said to the abbot who was acting as the preceptor for the ceremony, the Sojong ceremony, there's a line in that where you promise that you'll never engage in certain misdeeds, for example, ever again. And he said that I'm not going to say that I'm never going to engage in those deeds ever again because I'm not a liar. I'm just going to say I'm going to do my level best. So I'm going to put it that way. So there is like something to be taken from that. I mean, we need to proceed carefully, but there is something in the spirit of that, right? So it's interesting, especially when you look at this particular opponent power, the power of turning one's back on the fault, which is often translated as the promise. Like different holy beings, like very kind of respected commentators, they have different opinions about this particular point. Loso. So I guess it was a short story. Are there any other questions, Dave?
Sorry, I was muted. No further questions on social media?
Okay. All right. Well, we are at 12:05, so I think it's okay to end here.
Yeah.
And then next Sunday is us, right? And then the week after is Dawn.
Yeah.
So we'll see all of you next Sunday, we hope, and we'll continue with this Lamrim text of the 5th Dalai Lama with commentary by the Great 14th. And Geshe also said a little bit about Vajrasattva.
Yeah,
So thank you. Stay happy, everyone.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.